All right, this is Block 8, Pax Americana, Section 2, the beginning of the Cold War with the section the National Security Act of 1947. The modern American national security apparatus came into being in 1947. It is a massive reorganization of the federal government, organized by Herbert Hoover, of all people. President Truman invited President Hoover back to the White House to kind of reorganize the government. The great engineer was kind of back to work. And the reason for Truman's order was to kind of streamline the U.S. government to fight the Cold War. The first thing it did was it took the original Department of the Army and the Department of the Navy and combined them into one group, the Department of Defense, which was housed at the newly built Pentagon. So now we didn't have a Secretary of War and a Secretary of Navy, we had a Secretary of Defense. It's like that to this day. There'd be a Secretary of Defense to lead this new agency, and under him were secretaries of the three fighting services. So there's a Secretary of Defense, and under him a Secretary of the Army, a Secretary of the Navy, and a Secretary of the newly created Independent Air Force. The next body that was created was known as the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Joint Chiefs of Staff are the uniformed heads of the uniformed services. That if you want the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense is a civilian. The department heads of the Army, Navy, and Air Force are civilians. The Secretary of the Army is a civilian. The Secretary of the Navy is a civilian. But the Joint Chiefs of Staff are military officers, the top officers in their respective branch. Those guys make up the Chiefs of Staff, and their orders are to advise the President and the National Security Council. This National Security Council is a formal organization created by the National Security Act of 1947, and like the Council on Economic Advisors that was created during Roosevelt's term, the National Security Council advises the President on national security. It's made up of the President's National Security Advisor, which is not a cabinet position, but it's a very important position nonetheless. It's made up of the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the head of the CIA, the head of the National Security Agency, and anyone else the President deems necessary. It is one of the most important groups inside the government, the National Security Council. The first thing that the President sees every morning is a report prepared for him. It's called the Threat Assessment. What are the threats against America and America's interest today? President Obama got one this morning after being out all night partying last night. I promise you, he gets one every single morning. And that's the job of the National Security Council. This act, this 1947 National Security Act, also created the CIA. The CIA was the United States had always had kind of secret agents and spies and whatnot. The CIA is just a new bureaucratic term for it. Its task, its job was to gather intelligence from foreign countries, especially to gather intelligence from inside the Soviet Union. And it had this massive operations department that tried very, very hard to figure out what was going on inside the Soviet Union through spies and electronic surveillance and, James Bondy, things like that. Its competition with the Soviet version, the KGB, became legendary. That KGB officers would be operating in America, CIA officers would be operating in the Soviet Union, and they'd always be trying to catch the people that were in the country that really weren't supposed to be in the country. All of these things, the CIA, the National Security Council, the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, serve to streamline the government and make the government more efficient for its, what everyone knew was going to be a long Cold War struggle against the Soviet Union.